So welcome everybody to today's session, March 26, 2020. My name is Ufoma Ogaga. I will be your moderator and co-host for today. We are going to be talking about the legal checklist that every business should need, especially during this crisis that's going on. And we have special guest Roxann here to share a lot of those wonderful nuggets that you're going to need throughout this entire session, and also to get out of this little hump that we are in. Some housekeeping things. Let's see if we move this way. Some housekeeping things. Everybody's muted with the exception of our host and co-host. You will receive a recording of this entire session. So the session is going to be recorded. You will receive a recording by newsletter either tomorrow or Sunday. Takes me about a day or two to edit the recording. The newsletter will contain the recording as well as the handouts and all of the materials that are shared today during the webinar. In addition to that, the information will be posted on our website. If you've not had a time to go on our website, everything is posted on our website every time I publish it, and before I send it out in the newsletter, it goes on the website first. So feel free to check out our website, look at all the previous videos that we have, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make sure that you are up to date on all of that information. The video will be posted here just in case you don't pay attention to your email like most people are having to do during this whole crisis period. The other thing that I want to mention is please use the Q&A box to put your questions that you want us to answer during this entire live session. We'll kind of pause here and there throughout the session to ask Roxann some of the questions so that she can answer them live for you. We want this session to be very interactive, so ask a lot of questions. Use the chat box to engage and interact with each other. If you put your questions in there, Kathy can kind of monitor and flag that. That way we will make sure that Roxann answers it live for you. A little bit about me: founder and owner of Goshen Bookkeeping and Consulting. I specialize in empowering and educating and transforming the lives of nonprofit organizations and small business owners like solopreneurs that are really going through a lot of different chaos right now. Part of what I do is helping them leverage technology to reduce operational chaos, helping them understand their numbers to be able to build sustainable profits, which a lot of that is coming in handy right now. A lot of my clients that had reserve, this is what they're kind of living on, and that's what they're using during this difficult period. And also helping organizations be able to take their message, their mission, and expand and maximize that to different audience. So if you want to follow me on my Twitter, I'm very active on Twitter and Facebook. Feel free to follow me on any one of those platforms. Kathy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Me for better or for worse. I'm Kathy Grosskirth. I'm based here out of Austell, Georgia, and basically my practice has evolved to more of a training one-on-one with not only small businesses but other bookkeepers to teach them the proper workflows on how to use QuickBooks, not only the online platform but the desktop platform. I also do some contract training for Intuit. If you go to their qbtrainingevents.com website, then some of those webinars I either do lead for or I'm in the background doing the Q&A for those, which has been kind of fun. I've been doing that since September. Really enjoyed it. So I'm just glad to be here, and thanks all y'all for coming out and being a part of this tonight. And thanks Roxann for being a part.
No problem.
Alrighty, so our agenda for today, I'm going to share a little bit about our group, what we typically do, and why this session was moved to a webinar. You already know the reason. And then we're going to pass it on to Roxann. I'll introduce her and then pass it on to her to present her content for the day. We will have, in addition to during the webinar piece, we will have like a couple of minutes at the end of her session to be able to answer more questions and also give you an update of what's coming. We might potentially have to, switch a lot of our on-site events to a webinar. We'll let you know all of that lovely details towards the end. So feel free to stay towards the end, please. That helps our numbers, and that helps us make sure that you get the right information of what's upcoming next. So a little bit about us: we are not your typical nonprofit, not your typical networking group. I've been saying nonprofit all week long, so there's that. We really are focused on building long-term relationships with others, and mostly accounting professionals, small business owners, and nonprofit organizations. We're focused on building long-term relationships, giving back to our community, and also becoming a referral source amongst each other. We have different database systems to help. So if you're looking for a client, or if you are looking for services in a particular industry, we can either point you to people that are in that industry and just make the introduction and connection to provide the information that you need. Also, a cool thing that we do as part of our group is we host sessions like this. So like the webinar that you're listening to, we curtail a lot of different topics every year and figure out what topics to go for each month, and do that every fourth Thursday of the month. We either meet on site or we do webinars. This session that you're listening to today was actually going to be an on-site event, but the virus happened, and we decided not to, spread more chaos on top of the already chaos. We wanted to make sure that our community is safe, and we wanted to make sure that you're safe, that you can join and interact with us from the convenience of your home. You don't have to be amongst people, and you also don't have to get the virus if you are immune compromised, all that stuff. So wanted to make sure that our community is safe, so we switched everything to a webinar. Our April session is probably going to be the same, and May might be the same at the rate that we're going, but we'll let you know about all of those details towards the end of the presentation. So, Miss Roxann.
Yes, ma'am.
Is a small business and an entrepreneur attorney, very smart, very educated. Pleasure sitting with her over our Christmas dinner situation, holiday party last year, and just kind of getting to know her. She does specialize in doing lots of commercial litigation. If you are a new business, even an existing business that is going to contract negotiations, or if you just want to make sure you have the right legal terms, which this crisis is kind of exposing, not a lot of small business owners, even in nonprofit organizations, don't have the correct terms in their contracts to make sure that they are protected and to make sure that they can still function during a crisis. So she helps you go through all of those stuff and gives you great legal advice if you need so. You can follow her on all of our social media platforms, including her website, or you can email her. All of her information is on the screen. So Roxann, I'm going to pass it on to you, and you can share a little bit about yourself and why small business legal stuff is your passion.
Sure. Thanks so much. I'm really excited about this opportunity to talk with you guys and to just give everybody some tidbits in terms of how you can make sure you're setting up and or continuing to develop and grow your business in a proper structure. So we have what's called our business checklist, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. If I can figure out how to share this properly. We've sort of delved down to the 10 key points that you're going to want to make sure that you're addressing either when you're first setting up your business or as you continue to develop and grow your business. There's some things that you're going to have in place right from the door, and then there are things that, over the course of your business, you'll be able to add these items to your, add these different characteristics to your business. But these are the 10 sort of foundational things that you should have in place to have a well-structured business with a strong legal foundation. And that also helps with your bottom line, that helps with your profitability, and that also helps you to limit your liability and avoid risks down the road. So as I said, I am the co-founder and co-member of Smithers and Umewabo, and we focus on providing legal services to entrepreneurs and small business owners in Georgia, but in other states as well. Been practicing for almost 18 years, working in this space. I personally handle both corporate matters as well as disputes. and general advising for my clients. My business partner, Wanda Umewabo, she is our employment law and employee benefits partner. So she does a lot of stuff working with folks on whether they have an independent contractor versus an employee. It's a very important distinction to make, and it's particularly going to be coming up whether folks are employees or independent contractors and how that's going to play out with the coronavirus funds that are going to be made available to folks who can apply for unemployment, who's not eligible for unemployment, and what sort of exemptions that they are making for that going forward. And we've had our firm now for 7.5, almost 8 years. We will be coming up on our 8-year anniversary, really focusing with a passion on educating business owners and also providing top-notch legal services to them in a format and at rates that they're not necessarily going to be able to get at the larger firms from which we got a lot of our training and a lot of our professional experience. So we like to partner with organizations that are servicing business owners and entrepreneurs and provide legal education to them. So that's why we're here. We're very excited. And I am going to get started. Throughout the presentation, we'll be taking questions, so feel free to chime in with your questions. I really want this to be interactive, really want to make sure that we are focusing on the information that people really want to know about, and you'll get the slides afterwards, so if there are topics that we don't necessarily get into during this time period, you'll have that information. You're going to have a checklist that you can kind of check your business against and see where you stand. The first thing that we'll talk about with your business checklist is having a business structure. It'd be surprised how often I'll run into folks who have been in business for a fair amount of time and have a fair amount of revenue running through their business, and they either have not set up an actual formal business structure, or they are not happy with the structure. It's not really working for them. When an individual doesn't have a business structure, that's where you're called a sole proprietor. And I usually say an analogy, think of the 9-year-old that has a lemonade stand. A 9-year-old with a lemonade stand is a sole proprietor. And any adult who has a business should not have the same structure as the 9-year-old with a lemonade stand. We want to progress beyond that for various reasons. You want to be able to limit your personal liability, limit your assets being at risk if there is a problem. There are different tax benefits and tax implications for setting up a legal entity, and there are different management structures for those legal entities. And the main legal entities that you'll see are, as I said, sole proprietorship is really just you and that lemonade stand. There's a general partnership, which is pretty much out of favor right now. It pretty much means that everybody is still personally liable and generally liable for the debts of the business. So you don't see general partnerships happening very often anymore. The next phases that are the most popular that you see more are limited liability partnerships, limited liability companies, which a lot of smaller businesses are, and even some larger businesses still serve as LLCs. You also have S corporations, which are your small, closely held corporations, usually a family and friends run business. And then you have your C corporation. That's the largest, most formal structure that you can have. And so one of the first things you'll be doing when you're either setting up your business or thinking about how your business is structured is looking at the structure that you set up. And again, those 3 main criteria that you look at is whether it protects you against personal liability, the type of tax treatment that you'll have in the structure, as well as the level of formality that is required in terms of meetings, in terms of reporting, in terms of financial structure and auditing. And those business structures sort of go on a continuum from the least formal, that lemonade stand, all the way to the most formal, which is a publicly traded company like Nike or Amazon or something like that. The rest of those structures sort of fall into the spectrum from the least formal to the most formal and shuffle along that timeline. And they also vary in terms of your tax treatment. And from sole proprietor, where you're personally taxed for everything, to a corporation where the corporation pays taxes, at least sometimes, and then the employees and the owners as employees, whatever salary or income they get from the company, they are going to pay taxes there as well. Once you've decided on your structure, one thing you want to make sure you're identifying and that you're very clear on is who are the members, the shareholders, those are the owners of your business, who are going to be the officers or directors of that business if you go with a more formal structure like an S corporation or a C corporation. I've run into folks oftentimes that will say that they have a partner in their business, but they haven't formalized that relationship in documentation and clarified if it's a 50-50 partnership, if it's 60-40, who is technically the person who's going to be in charge and responsible for signing off on contracts or signing off on financial obligations within that business. So you want to be very clear on who are the owners with you in your business, as well as what are their ownership rights, what are their ownership obligations. If people are putting in sweat equity, you want to make sure it's clear what that sweat equity involves and what everybody is agreeing to contribute to the success of that business. And the best way to do that is to put that in writing. So here's a little chart that once again lays out what I was talking about earlier, the 3 characteristics that are going to differentiate the different types of legal entities and the structure and how they move along a spectrum from the least formal to the most formal. As I just talked about, once you are deciding on who are going to be the owners of your business, how everyone is going to contribute to the business, both financially as well as performance, you want to make sure that is in writing. And the way you do that depends on the type of structure that you set up. If you have a S corporation or a C corporation, you're going to have bylaws that lay out who's able to do what the business is allowed to do, what it can't do, who has power, how things sort of move within the business. Think of it as the DNA of your business. If you have a LLC, a limited liability corporation, you're going to have an operating agreement. Again, the members decide how the business is actually going to operate, and you put that in writing. Then if you have a partnership, either that limited liability partnership or that general partnership, you're going to have a partnership agreement, which again lays out those details of what everyone's contributing, both financially as well as sweat equity, how people can be brought into the business, how people can leave the business, and what happens if there are disputes. Those are a lot of important provisions that you want to take care of. If you don't have that documentation, you will default to whatever are the state law rules for either a corporation, for a partnership, or for a limited liability corporation in your state. For example, we've got people from other states. Most states are going to have a corporations law. Most states are going to have a limited liability corporation law or act, and they're going to have a partnership act. And it's going to lay out some default positions that if the parties don't decide amongst themselves how they want things to operate, then the state law steps in and makes those decisions for you. And I have found at times, particularly when people are just in a dispute with their business partners, and they haven't agreed to things on their own, and they look at the state law and they realize they don't really like what the state law says as their default position, but they have to go with that because they haven't decided for themselves. So you want to make sure that you have that piece in place. The next thing, number 4 on the checklist that you'll want to make sure you have that goes hand in hand with your bylaws, your operating agreement, that's going to be your corporate registration with your Secretary of State. Each state has a similar process. A lot of states now have it where you can register online, and it's a very smooth process. And my condolences go out to folks that are in California. It's still a paper system where you got to mail it in or you got to go in person. Hopefully one day they'll get that online. But this basically gets you the birth certificate for your business. I like to think of a business as you're having a baby. It's a child. It's going to take attention. It's going to take love. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take money. It's going to take organization to have a successful business and a successful child. And a lot of luck, quite honestly, in both cases. So your corporate registration is the birth certificate. That is how your business comes to exist as an actual separate legal entity. Some people stop there and they don't follow through with the rest of it, which is the operating agreement, which is sort of the DNA, how that child's going to move and function in the world. The information that you'll need to make sure you have for your corporate registration, you've got to have the contact information for the business. That can be a physical location. In many states, you can also have a PO box or other sort of mail service. You will need to have a registered agent and a registered office. And the registered office can be different because the registered office has to be a physical location and identify either a physical person or a business, a company that specializes in serving as registered agents. And what your registered agent is basically an official person or entity and location where your business receives official notices, whether those are legal claims from the government, whether that's what's called service of process. Those are legal filings that may come from the court, or individuals who are looking to communicate with your business in a formal manner. They can always find a location that they can go to and a person who can accept those documents and accept that information. Depending on the type of business you set up, you may have to identify officers. If you set up an S Corp or corporation, you'll have to identify a CEO, a secretary, and usually a CFO. You don't have to identify officers with your registration for a limited liability company in most states. But you will need to identify officers and their contact information for an S Corp or for a corporation when you register with the state.
We have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
So I'm gonna take a quick pause here and read some of them. That lots of questions. So somebody had a question about, for a tax/EIN, if your nonprofit's lending a 501c3 status, which type of business should you file under on the application with the IRS Gov? I know this is very specific to.
Yeah. Well, I will say I can tell you a little bit. I mean, in order to be a nonprofit organization from the federal standpoint and to receive either tax exempt status, where you are both, the highest tax exempt status is 501c3, where both the entity is not taxed as well as the entity can receive contributions that are tax deductible. That's a process that you have to go through with the IRS, and you have to be a corporation. You have to be in order to do that. Now, states may also have a designation of nonprofit at the state level, but that is not the same as having that tax exempt status from the IRS. And that's a separate process that you have to go through to get approved to have a tax exempt status. My partner Wando works a lot with nonprofits doing those applications, and so we can always follow up offline on that. But to that point, they mentioned something that I was also going to discuss, which is the other step. Once you set up your corporate registration, when you set it up, if you do it automatically through the websites with many states, it creates a very simple articles of incorporation or articles of organization for your entity. And it's computer generated, or you can draft your own. It's very simple. The next thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to then go to the IRS, irs.gov, and you'll want to set up your tax/employer identification number. It goes by both names, the TIN or the EIN. This is, again, if you think of your business as a child, that is the social security number for your business. It is the literal equivalent of your personal social security number. And as you conduct business and you do different things, you will have to have that EIN number to open a bank account for your business, to get government contracts for your business, to file taxes for your business. There are a lot of different things that you will need to have that tax ID number for your business. It's the same as a person having a social security number.
Okay, awesome. So the next question somebody had was, how best is it to decide on the business structure if you are a sole proprietorship and you want legal protection?
Well, first, if you are a sole proprietor, you have no legal protection. You are personally, and your assets are personally liable if there is a problem. So what I tell people is, if you're in your home, look to your left, look to your right. Everything that you see is at risk if you have a problem. So the first thing I say for a sole proprietor is to set up a legal structure. That creates what's called sort of a wall of liability, protecting you personally from the business and from the business's liabilities. And when I say liabilities, I'll explain what that means. It's if you have a problem, say you are running a restaurant and as a sole proprietor, and someone gets sick and they sue. They say, you know, I got sick, I was in the hospital, I had hospital bills, I lost a week of work. This is what's happened to me. If you don't have a business structure that's set up and it's just Roxann doing business as, you know, great macaroni and cheese, because I do make a great macaroni and cheese, then they're going to sue Roxann personally. And everything that Roxann has in her bank accounts, every asset that Roxann has is going to be at risk. If I lose that lawsuit, I've got to come out of my personal money to pay that claim. Now, you may have insurance, which is another piece that we'll talk about later in here, but it's coming from you personally. Now, if you set up, you know, Roxann's Great Macaroni and Cheese LLC, and there's a problem, then they're going to sue the business, the LLC. So they're going to look to the bank account of the business. They're going to look to the assets, my stash of macaroni, my stash of cheddar, my whatever, they are the assets of the business, and not Roxann personally and what I have in my house and in my refrigerator at home. So that's the benefit of setting up that wall between yourself and your business. And there are a couple of different things that you have to do in order to set up that wall and make it a strong wall. But that's the first step.
Awesome. So another question that somebody had was, when do you have to designate your preference for tax treatment? Can you change your tax treatment, and when? I don't think you have covered this part yet, or this is more of a tax question.
It's kind of a tax, well, it is a tax question. Now, when you do your EIN form, there is an additional step that you can take if you are setting up as an LLC, or you are setting up, I believe, as an S Corp. Now, I'm not a CPA, so I'm not going to claim all of this. But when you have an LLC and you're not a sole LLC member, if it's just you, it's automatically passed through taxation, which means it shows up on your tax return. If you have other members, other business partners, then you have an option to either be taxed as a partnership, which means ultimately you report the revenues of that business on your tax return, and you divvy it up amongst your partners based upon everybody's share in the business. Or you can decide to be taxed like a corporation, which then means the corporation pays taxes, and then if you're receiving whatever funds you receive directly, you pay taxes on that. But then that results in double taxation. So your dollars can be taxed twice. Now, you talk to folks in the Woodard group, you talk to the experts, they can give you strategies on what's the best scenario depending on the rest of your financial life and goals as to whether it makes sense to make that designation. There are some timelines by which you can make that initial designation with the IRS, and then they can work with you to see if and when you can change it down the road. But on the EIN form, there is a question about it initially.
Awesome. So those are all the questions for now, and I'm going to let you continue.
Okay, perfect. We're making good time. Okay. So those first 4 items are the basics. Those are the basic things that you need to do, and congratulations, you are in business. Some of the things that I advise that go along with that is obviously setting up a bank account and keeping your funds separate, your revenue, keeping your expenses from your personal life and your business life separate in your bank account. That helps to protect that wall that I said you put up to give yourself that that line between your liability and the business's liability. So those are things that have to be done at the beginning. I advise every business to do those things at the top. That's your basic foundation to your business. The next things that we are going to look at on the list are things that are sort of phase 2 of making sure that you set up the structure of your business and making sure that you are developing your business in orderly fashion. And they will add value to your business, and they will also, most importantly, protect your business from expenses down the road if you have an issue. And I have to say, you know, I sort of wear both hats as a business owner. I like to be positive. I like to think everything's going to go well. We're going to do great. And then the attorney part of me, I'm professionally required to be Debbie Downer. And that means at least thinking about what can go wrong and preparing for it in advance. So I'm the one, you know, the sun's out, that's great, but I'm also going to put an umbrella in the car. It's just a professional hazard, and that's what lawyers do. So these are those protections that you want to have. First thing that you'll look at is if you're adding a team in any way, shape, or form to your business, whether it's employees or you're going to have consultants working with you, you're going to have your friend helping, your sibling, your spouse, whoever. You'll want to have either employment agreements, or most importantly for folks who are not employees, you want to have independent contractor agreements. That is basically setting up and defining the business relationship between yourself and any support staff that you're going to have performing on your behalf for your business. That can be a business development person, a marketing person, that can be actual staff to a certain extent on the front lines as you build up your business. And we know that a lot of times with new businesses, they, you know, can be in a precarious position as they're starting up. And so they'll usually, their first level of adding staff is independent contractors versus employees. And you want to make sure that you set those relationships up properly, that there is a contract, there is a structure to that relationship, so that you don't have any misunderstandings or issues down the road and they're not designated as an employee. And that's a whole other program that we go into, understanding the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. The first step of that is having a contract with them. Some things that key things that you want to always think about in your independent contractor agreements, as well as in your employment agreements, are what I like to generally call sort of restrictive covenants. There are ways to limit the activity of the individual that would be to the detriment of your business, and to protect your business, particularly once that relationship ends. That's going to be confidentiality, making sure that the information that you're providing about your business, about your customers, about your process, if you've got a secret recipe, if you have a secret code or program that is the key piece of your business and the value of your business, limiting that individual's ability to share that information with other people, with potential competitors, with customers, with whomever. Keeping that information private and specific to your business. It can just be, you know, your finances that you don't want everyone to know about in terms of your business, but you have to share some of that information with an independent contractor for them to provide the services that you need. Next level is a non-compete. That means that, you know, you don't want a situation where you have someone who's come into your business, you've taught them how to run your business, you've taught them your process, you've given them access to your clients or customers, and then they decide that they want to go into business for themselves in a competing business and utilize that information. Or they want to then go and work for a competitor, and now they've got inside information about your business. So you'll want provisions in there that will limit their ability to do that. Similarly, you'll want provisions in there that bar solicitation. What that means is if someone leaves your company, and they are attempting to woo your staff away to help them build their business. Or they go to a competitor and the competitor wants them to, you know, get other people from your sales team or other people from your development or your operations team to come to that competitor. You can put some limits on their ability to do that, because there's a lot of value that's put into either your employees or your independent contractors when you are training them to help you run and grow your business. Now, important thing to know is that even if you have an employment contract, the employee can still be at will, as long as the language in the contract makes that clear. And then that means that you still have your flexibility to end that employment if there's misdealings or for any reason other than, obviously, you cannot terminate anyone for discriminatory reasons. That's the key limit to an at-will employment ability, or your ability to employ people at your will. The next piece that you'll want to have that falls in the same category is going to be your employee manuals and or your standard policies and procedures for operations. You want to have clear, consistent rules for all of the employees and enforce those rules. And you want to have clear and consistent policies and procedures for how you run your business. These are key pieces for you to add value to your business. And it helps to take you from really creating a job for yourself to creating an actual business that is an asset that will stand and continue to grow and exist, even if you're not in the day-to-day of it. Everyone's goal, to a certain extent, should get to the point where their business will continue to operate if they go on vacation, if they decide that they want to scale back their hours, if they decide that they have other interests that they want to have. If you have policies and procedures in place, you have clear instructions for your employees, you increase the likelihood that your business can stand on its own outside of your day-to-day efforts. And that can really free you up to think about the big picture for your business and to also plan for the long-term growth of your business if you're not always bogged down in the day-to-day operations of the business. Any questions on those, or I'll move on?
You can continue.
Okay, cool. Okay, so then this next step, we're going beyond some of the basic things that you have to have for your business, and things that you want to really think about and consider for this holistic, well-developed, well sort of set up business. It's a key piece that I probably, if I do this again, will move higher up on our checklist. These are your insurance policies. Insurance is not often required in many cases. It is very prudent to have insurance to help protect the business against the unforeseen that we can't predict, but we know life, things happen. Particularly if you are looking to have government contracts, if you are looking to have contracts with larger corporations as a supplier to them, there are going to be various requirements for levels of insurance. Once you have a certain number of employees, there are requirements for workers' compensation insurance. So there are some things that will be required. The other levels of insurance we recommend that everybody has. Some of the basic things are your general commercial liability. That basically covers if you cause a problem to someone else. Your business or an employee or a product causes an injury to someone else, a customer, what have you. Workers' compensation kind of speaks for itself. Once you have employees over a certain level, you have to have workers' compensation. Government contracts are going to require it. Most of your, if you're a subcontractor for different businesses, they're going to require workers' compensation coverage for your employees. Product liability. This is an offshoot of the general commercial liability insurance, and this is particularly for companies where you are creating a product that you are selling. to the public, and it's going to cover claims and injuries that will come from that. If your business includes you having a professional license, your licensing entity may require you to have professional liability insurance in and of itself. If it doesn't, we still recommend that you have that liability insurance. Automobile insurance, if your business includes transport or includes the use of automobiles as a key piece of your business, you will want to make sure that you have coverage for those things as well. A key point that I want to remind people of is if you have a home-based business, I think right now everybody has a bit of a home-based business, but if beyond a pandemic situation, you have a home-based business, you'll want to look into the type of coverage that will protect you and your home-based business. Your homeowner's insurance will not necessarily cover losses of inventory that you have at home. If you have a flood or a fire and you've got 10,000 t-shirts or widgets that you made at home that you're selling, your homeowner's insurance won't necessarily cover that. If you have people coming to your home for your business, even deliveries in some cases, their homeowner's insurance may not cover that if it's icy out and they fall when they're coming into your house or leaving out of your house. Your homeowner's insurance may not specifically cover that unless you have a rider to that policy that is for a home-based business. I also recommend that people look into a personal liability policy, a personal umbrella policy, which in many cases is called a PUP. It can be added on to your homeowner's insurance. They're usually $15 to $20, and you can get $1 million of coverage, and that protects you personally, so that if someone still does bring a claim against you and the lemonade stand or you and your business, that there's coverage there as well. One of the key things that people don't always think about what your insurance covers, it's not just if there's a claim that it has to be paid out. They also cover paying for an attorney to represent you and to handle the matter. And what I caution people is, even if ultimately you are not at fault, even if ultimately you've done nothing wrong, you'll still incur expense to defend yourself if a lawsuit is filed against you. And a lawsuit can be filed very easily. Some states it's a $75 filing fee, and as long as they spell your name right, and they don't even have to really spell it right, and they've got an address for you, they can sue you. And it takes time and it'll take money to pay an attorney to get you out of that litigation. And in most states, if you are a business, you have to be represented by an attorney. You cannot represent yourself. So all the folks who watch Judge Judy and think they can handle it, you can't do that if your business is sued. So, and even if you're not liable, you can spend a fair amount of money defending yourself. And that's not necessarily money that comes back to you. In America, we have a system where if you sue somebody and you're successful, you don't automatically get your fees back. Just like if you defend yourself and you're successful, you don't automatically get your fees. It's not a winner gets their fees kind of situation, unless it's specifically laid out in the contract or in the statute. So people need to be aware of that.
Now, quick question. So you mentioned that most insurance, is it the like your home insurance that has the coverage for attorneys, or is it all insurance?
Most insurance is going to cover, if you have insurance of a certain level, it's going to cover either paying directly for an attorney, or it'll, in some cases, reimburse you. And then you want coverage that pays directly, because getting reimbursed, as people know with their health insurance, it's a lot better that they pay directly than you have to pay and then you have to wait to get reimbursed. If anybody's gone through that with their insurance, with their health insurance, you don't want to be in a situation where you're waiting to get reimbursed from your insurance company for money that you've already put out. And that assumes you have the money to put out in the first place. So most of these coverages, when they're protecting you from, when they're protecting you to be defended, they're going to cover that. They have attorneys that will cover that. The other types of insurance that you'll want to think about beyond these basic protecting you against claims that are coming against you are insurance to cover your business if there's a business interruption, like the situation that we're having right now. Because your liability insurance doesn't cover that unless you are being sued. If you want to have a claim and have some protection for bad things that happen to you, you have to have a different type of business insurance. There can be lost revenue, lost sort of business activity if your business is shut down for some reason. If you are leasing a space where your business is located, your landlord may have insurance, but your lease is probably going to require you to have insurance for your space and for your business, and to cover any of those eventualities as well. There's coverage for cybersecurity if you're dealing a lot with the public's information. If you have a very robust website that's taking data and taking payments, and would be, a target for hackers, you may want to have cybersecurity insurance that covers a lot of things in those instances. There's also employee fraud insurance. If you're going to have key employees that you have to trust with a lot of the operations and the funds of your business, you can have insurance that covers if there are instances where employees, put their fingers in the cookie jar and are not being honest. So there are a lot of different coverages that you can think about. Most of the major insurance companies have plans that are tailored to businesses, but you'll want to shop around, and you'll want to kind of talk through these issues and develop a relationship with an insurance agent to really understand what your coverages are, what sort of scenarios that you might face with your particular business. Because one size insurance doesn't necessarily fit all, but it's definitely important to have. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, cool. So beyond the insurance, the next piece is licenses and certifications. Some of these will be your professional licenses that you have to have if you have a business that's based on a profession. But there may be certifications for other types of businesses that you're going to have, whether that's a liquor license. There's specific licensings that you have to have if you're going to have cosmetology services or barber services, stylist services, education certifications and licensings that may be required, board of health licensings that may be required if you are going to be in the restaurant business. In addition to those industry-specific licenses and certifications, your state, county, and city may have additional licensing and certificate requirements that you have to meet. Usually the state level is going to be a lot of those professional licenses, and then your county or your city are going to require a business license locally. They may require you to have other certifications to do business in that county where your business is situated. And that goes back to the address that you used when you set up your registration. Some cities or counties or states, it's a flat fee. In other places, it's graduated based upon your revenue from the prior year. And so you're sort of tax in arrears. And these are oftentimes the licenses and certifications are a tax without calling them a tax. It's really what they are, including the Secretary of State. Because every year you have to renew your registration with the Secretary of State, and there's a fee that goes along with that. It's a relatively small fee, but there is a fee that you have to pay to renew that registration with the state to stay in good standing with the state. And it's a revenue generator for localities. Let's see. All right, now we're getting into some of the more, the next level of things that you'll want to be thinking about. And we'll spend a fair amount of time kind of talking about these strategies, and particularly how this number 9 is coming into play right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on. If your business is going to provide ongoing services to customers, you're going to be a vendor, you're going to be providing larger products that require a larger process, a larger manufacturing process, where you're selling in such large volumes that it's sort of ongoing relationships, you want to make sure that you have a service agreement that you utilize with your vendors and your customers. If you're doing things online, you have a website, you can often put that on your website as well. You'll want to have your terms of use on your website if you are selling products to your website, or your website and your application or the code, if they are the product. If you're doing a software as service sort of product, you'll want to have your terms of use. And I think we're all very familiar with that little box that comes up whenever we sign up for something new online, and we check the box. We usually don't read it, and we just check yes, because we want to move on. We want to get the app, or we want to get to whatever it is that shows us what our face would look like if we were 104, or whatever it is that we download to our phones and to our computers. We just click the box and we move on. Well, all that language in that box, they're basically laying out the terms of the relationship and what you are agreeing to in exchange for the privilege of putting bunny ears on your face while you're on Instagram. That's what you're agreeing to. And oftentimes with different companies, you'll get updates in the mail. Sometimes you'll get emails, you'll get those notifications from Facebook, or you'll get those updates from like your credit card company or your bank where they are updating their terms of use or their service agreement. That's because somewhere in that first box that you clicked, it said that they could change those terms whenever they wanted. And all they had to do was give you notice, which is why you get those long pamphlets in the mail, because they've changed their terms of use, or you get that email from Facebook that now they have access to everything on your computer and they can sell it to whomever they want if you keep your Facebook account open. That's all that language that we don't read. But for our purposes, you'll want to have your service agreements with your customers and your vendors. That's going to secure your business. That lays out your scope of work that you're providing, that lays out how much you're being paid, that lays out, or how much you're paying and how much scope of work you're expecting to get back, how that compensation structure works, timeline for performance, any metrics for performance, what happens if there's a dispute, and what laws are going to govern that performance. And here you'll see again, you'll see the language that I talked about earlier when we were looking at your employment agreements and your independent contractor agreements. Is the best way to really put meat on those agreements and those provisions in your contracts, your independent contractors and your employees, are then to have companion provisions in your service agreements with your customers and vendors that you're working with. Meaning, again, whatever information you're providing to them, they have to keep it confidential. They can't share it all around. They cannot particularly compete with you in your business. And there are some parameters on how broad that can be. Usually you can do either customers that you've already had in common. You can do for a specific timeline, 1 or 2 years is you'll often see, or you can do it for a specific geographic area. So they can't compete with you in these 3 counties that you have established a business in for a year. And then once the year's up, the law wants to give everybody a chance to compete. And non-solicitation. Your customer can't decide, I could probably do this a lot cheaper if I take this in-house. So I'm just going to take your customers. I'm going to take your employees or your independent contractors, and I'm just going to hire them directly. And then I'll just have them do the work for me, and I can save paying you that markup. Well, the non-solicitation limits their ability to do that. And again, it's usually can be employees or independent contractors of a certain level for a certain time period, or you can put a penalty in, like they have to, reimburse you for the lost productivity or the time you had to spend to train that person. You'll oftentimes see that one in staffing agreements. If you've worked as an employee through a staffing company, or you have utilized a staffing company, they're going to have provisions in there to protect their workforce, because that's an asset for them. And for most businesses, your key employees are an asset. You spend time developing, training, trusting them. And if that knowledge goes out the door with no limitations or without any compensation, that can really hurt a business. And now the states do put some, as I said, some limits on your ability. You can't ban your janitor for life from ever working for another business anywhere. That doesn't work. But your sales rep can be banned for a year from working for one of your customers or one of your competitors, and can be banned forever from utilizing your confidential information, and can be banned from trying to get their coworker to join them at the other company. And those are some good protections, and we have successfully enforced those protections for clients in court. I've used them as a hammer against people, and I've had them used as a hammer against my clients. So they work in either direction. Something that people are just now getting a bit of an understanding of is a unique term that most lawyers know about, but most regular people haven't heard of. And through this pandemic, people are starting to find out about this interesting contract provision called force majeure. And what force majeure is, it roughly translated is basically sort of an uncontrolled act, an act of God, but it also includes acts of government, acts of war. This is a provision that's in most contracts that people don't pay a lot of attention to. And in most cases, it doesn't come into play. But this is a time that we're living in where force majeure provisions are coming into play big time, and they're having their sort of day in the sun. So basically, a force majeure provision says that either one side in the contract or both parties in the contract's obligations to perform are canceled. They can be canceled completely. They can be paused. They can be extended if they are prevented from performing because of acts of God, acts of government, acts of war. And usually the acts of God are acts of nature, hurricanes, huge natural disasters. I would argue, I'm sure there are a lot of lawyers right now there are a lot of associates in law firms writing research memos about whether or not their clients can get out of a contract right now, because they're trying to argue that this pandemic and the shutdown is a force of nature and an act of God, and they're canceling contracts and canceling obligations. So the force majeure provision, while not used very often, it is a key piece that comes into play when things go really, really, really wrong. And like a situation like now where things are going really wrong on a big scale, but they can also come into play if things go really wrong on a smaller scale, like your business, you're renting in an office building and the office building catches on fire and is damaged, or it sees something happens on a large scale level that you can't control that prevents you from performing. It can give you some relief from your obligations in the contract. On the flip side, it can often give the other side relief from their obligations to you in the contract. So I think people are going to be paying more attention to that force majeure provision. It usually comes at the end of the contract, and people are tired of reading anyway, and they don't really pay attention. They just want to sign it and move on. So that's a key one that people are learning about. And last week, I kept yelling at my TV when people were talking about, well, we're going to have to do this, we're going to have to do that. I'm like, everybody's got a force majeure provision. They need to be reading them and seeing if they can hold off on things because it's there.
Now, I have a question about that, because this is a great topic, and I'm so glad that you brought the force majeure stuff up, because I had a situation with a particular client where this was in their contract and it impacted them severely for that. So the key question I want to ask, so we might have some people we have some of our attendees that are saying, my business just took a major hit because of this whole virus stuff. Most of accountants and most business owners, your contract might say, you know, you pay for services in advance, and you pay for this in advance, blah, 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 right? But what advice would you give to businesses, accounting professionals that are, they have the contract, you know, all the terms and everything, and their client comes to them and say, I have no business and I can't keep paying you. I gotta cut you loose. Like, is there any protection in still enforcing the contract to for us to get paid? Or feel free, those of you on the call, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box, and so that we can answer them. This is the force majeure stuff is very much a topic that many people are talking about. You want to make sure that, you know, if you have questions of how can you phrase it in your contract, how can you, you know, educate your clients or help them through this whole process, if they're coming with, you know, coming to you saying, I have no business, I don't know how to, you know, I want my services to be stopped and stuff like that. Yeah, you can continue.
Okay. All right. Cool. You asked me a question.
Oh, was that I was
So
actually
we were talking about. Okay. So we were talking about if a client comes to them. So here's the reality is, if you have this force majeure provision, it may offer your customer protection against their payment obligations. Depends on what the provision says. Some force majeure provisions put everything on pause for a certain amount of time, maybe 30 days, 90 days, until the situation can resolve itself, and then the obligations go back into effect. Some simply cut off the obligations to perform. And so it can depend on what your contract says in that sense. You can also sometimes, some contracts have provisions for a suspension of the contract that can play as well. You know, obviously, other than that, the contractual obligations still go forward unless you agree to forbear and give them time to suspend the contract, or the parties can agree together to do so. And so ultimately, while you have a right to enforce the terms of your contract, you'll have to make some business decisions, which is something I talk with clients all the time. I talk about their legal rights versus what makes sense in terms of a business decision. The reality right now is, unless it's an emergency matter, the civil courts are pretty much shut down. So legal action on a good day is slow. And so on a good day, it's not necessarily going to happen right now. So if I'm talking to a client about something like this, and if we can evaluate whether or not they think the customer is telling the truth, or if the customer is simply using this as an opportunity to avoid paying a bill, then we can talk about a response, whether that means, okay, well, I'm suspending your performance as well, and, you know, we'll have to revisit in a certain amount of time or whatever. But this is kind of what's happening with the economy, is at different levels, both downstream and upstream, people are not able to meet their contractual obligations. And so it creates a ripple effect. You know, businesses, their customers are canceling orders, their customers aren't coming in, depending on the type of business. And so then in order to salvo themselves, or they don't need the workforce, so they're having to let go of their workers until the business ramps back up. And so unfortunately, when you have this sort of widespread downshift and lockdown, it's going to kind of impact everybody. So I would suggest with a lot of clients is maybe agreeing with the customer to pause things if possible, or negotiating partial payments or something so that you can keep a little money for them. But everybody is trying to either preserve the funds they have, or what this is really showing us is that the majority of people are living paycheck to paycheck, whether that's a little paycheck or that's a big paycheck. And as soon as that paycheck stops flowing, everybody's in trouble.
Awesome. And what would you say, and just to follow up on that question, because this is stuff that I've been seeing on social media, of where there's some business that each different states have considered that they're essential, or maybe there's some that are non-essential, for those that are not essential, I've seen some social media posts of where the employer, the business owner, they're required to open up their doors, and obviously employees are not coming to work because of this whole craziness happening. As a retaliation to that, they're laying off those employees. Is there some level of protection in any of the different checklists or the different types of agreements and contracts and stuff that you had mentioned? Is there any level of protection that the business owner has to, lay off employees that refuse to come into work in the midst of a government order that says everybody stay home except essential people? And then what is the reverse from an employee standpoint?
Right. Well, I think there's one distinction to make. So there's a difference between, so when the government as an employer makes a decision about what government services are essential and not essential, there's more leverage where they can compel, to a certain extent, employees to come in. There may be statutory rights that they have. There may be rights if those employees are unionized that they've agreed to in their collective bargaining agreement. When in this situation where the government what they're more often doing is they are ordering things closed, and they are allowing certain businesses to stay open, as opposed, and those are what they are deeming essential. Now, as opposed to them ordering them to stay open, they're saying the grocery stores can stay open. I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think what they're doing is demanding that Publix stays open. What they're saying is, because your product is essential to people at this stage of the game, because your product is essential, we are going to allow you to stay open. Now, Publix, for some reason, chose, we don't have any employees, we can't do anything, or for whatever reason, decided that they wanted to close. They could close. So there's a difference between them being demanded, them being ordered to stay open, which would be, we would have to be so far down the rabbit hole where the government is, what they would do is like nationalizing different industries or nationalizing different organizations for the good of, society, and then basically taking them over and telling them they have to stay open. So right now it's you can stay open because you fall into these categories. So because it's not an order and the employers are staying open, it can depend on sort of either their employment agreement, their handbooks, and or if they have collective bargaining agreements, whether or not in this type of situation, if an employee doesn't come in and they're scheduled to work, whether they fall under the standard obligations at any other time where an employee is, doesn't show up for work and they're an at-will employee and they can be terminated. There may be exceptions when there is this sort of national crisis or national emergency. I don't know enough about it to say one way or the other. The person that we can ask would be you at SNU, which is my partner, Wanda, who is our employment law person. I know enough to know that there might be a rule that covers it. She could actually know the rule.
Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah.
And can I piggyback on what you're saying, Roxann? Because, just common sense, this is something that is unprecedented. It's worldwide. We don't know how long this is going to last. But even though there may be the legal side of things, common sense dictates that, we may want to think with, a lot of times with our hearts and kind of go with that as well. Because I think if you always try to do things by thinking of the other person and thinking of others, then you're going to make the right decisions, whether or not it's legal or not. It may be legal to let someone go or something, but you've got to look at the totality of the situation when you do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the reality is right now, like I said, the reality is the courts are kind of closed, so the level of enforcement that you could get beyond hiring an attorney to sort of send a scary letter at this point to kind of let them know where things stand, because that's going to be an expense that that the business would have to incur. And if the customer doesn't have the funds, until they have the funds, there's at the end of the day, there's nothing to collect. As you know, my mom would say, for Mississippi, you can't get blood from a turnip. So one of the first things I do when I work with clients that are looking to collect on a matter is let's see if there's money to be collected. Because if the individual doesn't have money or assets, then it's a wild goose chase. Even if you're right, okay, you're right, and now you paid me because I'm going to expect to be paid whether you collect or not. I'm not Kim Nugent, so I get paid even if you don't get paid. That it's not a smart business decision to pursue it unless there's some other reason, like you're setting a precedent in the industry. You want to make sure it's clear on the street that, you know, you don't take being, your company will not allow people to take advantage of it. There are some other reasons to pursue it otherwise, but ultimately it's money. And if there is no money, do you spend money to get money that doesn't exist?
Awesome. So I am going to let you continue because we will try to wrap up in a couple of minutes that we have left, but go ahead and wrap up your session.
Sure. So the last piece is intellectual property protection. This can be really tangible things, but it can also, that can add value to your business that people sometimes don't think about or don't protect in the way that they should and they could, that adds additional value. If you ever look at your, I think it's not your P&L, if you look at your balance sheet, there's often a designation for goodwill. And this is often where the value of your intellectual property is taken into consideration. It's kind of that nebulous brand in your reputation in the market. And the more secure and identified that IP is, the more definite that goodwill is, and the more value you can actually put in that goodwill category on your balance sheet to add value. So the three main ways that you can protect intellectual property are trademarks, copyright, well, four ways: trademarks, copyrights, patents, and or maintaining something as a trade secret. So a trademark is your name, your logo, your slogan. So our business name, Smithers and Umewabo LLC. We could trademark that. We have a logo with our S and a plus and a U. We can trademark that. Our slogan is your trusted 360 general counsel. And you see that we have a little R because we have registered that as a trademark. So those are things that you can trademark. You come up with other slogans, other names for products or things, you can trademark them. Copyrights are things that you create, written or composed content. It can be art, it can be the content in this PowerPoint. So you see at the bottom, I have my little trademark symbol on the firm's name. So that can be something that you can copyright. Patents are something that you invent. If you create an app, the source code for that app. If you use a developer, making sure in that contract that you own the source app, the source code that you paid your developer to create for you. Your developer is often going to want to hold it as leverage until they've been paid in full. So there can be some bantering around about that. Your process, your recipes. If you create, I had a client that created this tool that you can use in construction. And then we had a patent for that tool that person created. Trade secrets can be source code, it can be process that you keep private within the business and you don't share. That's going to be confidential information. That can be your client list. That can be recipes again. You know, the recipe for Colonel Sanders, KFC, that's not public. It's a trade secret. It's kept hidden. The recipe for Coca-Cola is in the vault. And it's protected that way. And so you can protect things that way. One thing that I do talk to clients about when they're first setting up their business and they're thinking about the name of their business, just like they think about the name of their kid, is if they have long-term goals for creating a brand or adding value in that sense, I usually talk to them and counsel them about how unique the name is, making sure that there aren't other businesses that are similarly named, because what you don't want to do is set everything up, do all this work, and somewhere down the road you decide you want to trademark things, and you find out that someone else has already trademarked the same name or something that is so similar that the trademark office will not allow you to trademark it. Or somewhere down the road, you get a cease and desist letter from somebody who already is using that name and wants you to stop using it because you're infringing on their rights. And you can either spend a lot of money battling with them, or you've got to go back and change all your logos, all your materials, your website, all that stuff. And so we'll talk about that at the beginning to make sure that they come up with a name that is not common enough that it's already being used, so that if they want to trademark things down the road and they want to create some value around that name and that logo or that slogan, that it's available for them to do. And in the same category, domain names. One of the things that people do very early is, register their domain name so that when they're ready for their website, so they want to expand with other products, you can very quickly and inexpensively reserve several domain names for different products or services or things you might want to do if you want to segment those things on the web and not have them all on the same website.
Awesome.
So at the end of the presentation, and you'll also receive a handout, we sort of give you a form that you can use to sort of think through and assess where your business is in terms of these top 10 items. And you don't have to have them all at the same time. Some are critical at the beginning to have, and then some you can add over time. But you should always be looking to complete this checklist and reviewing it to make sure that the information in the documents that you have that qualify for the checklist are serving you well, they fit for the way you do business, and that they are properly protecting you. And so the final part is just, again, a little bit about our firm. We're, dedicated to working with business owners. We do a lot of legal education. I will do a small plug for our legal education page on our website. We have a YouTube channel that we're launching where we're putting up short videos with content that just little snippets of business advice for owners, both myself and I got my business partner to put up videos, which is a Herculean feat. We're very excited about that. You can always check those out and find out what we're up to on our website. And I think that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Roxann, for joining us and for sharing a lot of nuggets. I know we are kind of like 7:31-ish, according to my clock. I don't see any other questions right now from attendees, so I am going to switch gears to kind of share a little bit about what's upcoming, our events that are upcoming. So let me try to share my screen back again. Okay, so we have, let me move that there. So April, we kind of, meeting for April was supposed to be on site, talking about networking, but we decided that's not a good topic right now because nobody can network physically on site. So we decided to switch that and move it to like a different month, a different month in the year. Kathy, you want to kind of jump in and share a little bit about what you were thinking about doing in month of April?
Yeah. Right now it's kind of open-ended. I was leaning towards doing like a panel to kind of talk about some of the things over the course of, by that time we will have been into this probably about 6 to 8 weeks. Some of us a little longer, some of us for a little bit less. So I'm in the process of trying to put together a panel of some folks who've been doing this for a while, and also maybe a couple of individuals who were kind of new to this at the outset, just kind of bounce some ideas off of what's worked for them, what's not worked, and also, what recommendations or suggestions having gone through this. But that's kind of in the works right now. We will provide more information on that and the links to that once we get all those finalized, which I hope to do in the next couple of weeks. And then the May 28th library resources webinar may also be converted over to a webinar as well. And that's something we'll have to reach out to Mr. Odin with the library to see if he's willing to do that, which I'm sure he will. He's pretty open-minded about doing that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where we are with that. I posted a link to all the different ways you can reach out to us, and the way that, and also they're listed here as far as, our website for all the resources and everything. Bookmark those if you will. Like I said, you can actually save a copy of the chat, which will have all those links in it. So that way you can go back and visit those at your leisure. So that way you can always keep in touch with us. And if you haven't done it already, make sure you join our Facebook group and our Facebook page. So that way you can kind of keep up with everything. And also, if you want to register for on-site events, there's the link to the Eventbrite page there. So many ways to get in touch with us and to keep up with what's going on in our group.
Awesome. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a wonderful 90 minutes of session. Learned a lot, got more information. I hope that you learned enough information that you can either go back and revise some of your contracts and contact Roxann to help you go through that whole process. And also share some of the nuggets and the knowledge that you learned with your clients that are either going through similar situations during this difficult time. I do hope that everybody is social distancing and staying away from outside, and just doing their parts to make sure that our community can survive and get through this little hump that we are going through right now. So follow all of our social media platforms. That way, when we post the links to what we're doing next month and the upcoming months, you'll be the first to know that information. The recording for this video is going to be sent out to you in a newsletter with links to all of the handouts and everything that was covered today, including the flyers that Roxann provided for us. And let's see what else is also. The video is going to be also posted on our social media YouTube channel, just in case if you don't get the email for whatever reason. So that is it from me. Thank you, Roxann, for joining us. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their evening. So thank you all for attending.